right. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on wherever or whenever you're listening from. Welcome to the Perspectives on Leadership podcast brought to you by Fire Engineering. I will once again always start with gratitude and thank everybody who is listening for tuning in today. As I always say, you have a choice of what you can listen to and what you can digest. The fact that you're listening to this podcast, I'm very grateful, very humble, and I will do my best to keep providing as much good, rich, valuable content to the listeners I possibly can. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm very proud to be an assistant chief of Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. Also honored to be part of that fire engineering family as an author, presenter at FDIC, and a host for this podcast. As I always say, I always mention that Chief Halton instilled in me the need to always make sure that whatever we talk about, we make it tactically deployable. So whether we're talking about leadership or tactics or strategies or whatever, to try to focus on the tactics as well as the concept. And in his honor, I will always do that. As I always say, perspective is my passion. It's one of those things that I can't get enough of. I love talking about perspective in all kinds of ways, shapes, or forms. In my personal journey as a student of leadership, I continue to be fascinated by how each of our perspectives are different and how those affect our ability to lead. The goal for this podcast is always the same: to take a concept or a trait that we associate with leadership and take a deep dive down that rabbit hole. There are just so many people in our fire service that have so much to offer. And as I talk to them over this medium and this platform, I want to make sure that I'm able to take that and distill it and express it all out there to everybody who's listening so that we all can learn from those experiences. So as always, I'm doing my part to pass it on to my brothers and sisters. So I'm thankful to David Rose, Diane Rothschild, the Clarion team, and especially my agency in Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue for allowing me to continue to do this. So today, I want to talk about mentoring, and this is going to be a good one. I was excited to put this together. The first time I got to teach at FDIC was in 2021, and the title of my presentation was When Rotary Saws Meet Overhead Doors. It was a blast. I got to geek out on a subject that I had been passionate about for years and had some amazing, great interaction from people from all over the country. It was great to be able to talk shop with so many motivated firefighters at that conference. At the end of my presentation, a firefighter from Colorado, Adam Haywood, came up to me. He had the same interest and same excitement with saws and saw work that I did. And of course, we hit it off immediately. We connected afterwards, and we've been talking shop, discussing tactics, and continuing that initial discussion up until today. But more specifically, what I remember from our initial conversation was his energy, his drive, his motivation. And he expressed to me how he wanted to do things like start his own training company and teach like I was doing and present at conferences and so on and so forth. His goals were aspirational. They were inspiring. And he was asking if we can exchange content and whatnot. And it immediately brought me back in time to when I was first starting to really dive into this content. I remember reaching out to subject matter experts, reading books, going to conferences. And I remember reaching out specifically to Bill Gustin, Captain Bill Gustin from Miami-Dade, who I'm about an hour away from. This was years ago. And I remember asking him the same questions that Adam was asking me those few years ago. And I remember how giving Bill was, Captain Gustin. He didn't hesitate for 1 second. He gave me so much information after I asked that I couldn't keep it from him. He just a ton of information, a ton of knowledge from articles and invited me to teach with him and all kinds of things. And he just gave and gave and gave. And it was empowering. And it felt just wonderful that I asked this guy a question and boom, there's all the information. So I remember thinking when Adam asked me these questions, I have a choice. I can keep all this information. I can silo it. I can hoard it and say, no, man, no. I'm the saw guy. I'm that guy. That's my space. That's my stuff. You can't have this stuff. Or I can share freely. I can empower. I can help this guy, this motivated firefighter who's growing, who's doing things the right way, slowly, gradually, who's earning his keep, who's getting his reps in, who's doing the research, who's putting the work in. I can help that guy. And that's what I chose to do. And it was because that was being modeled to me by guys like Bill Gustin and other people. So I'm excited to take this dive into this relationship that has developed between Adam and I during this podcast and talk a little bit about mentoring, empowerment, and maybe even geek out on some saw stuff, which I'm excited to do. So before I give the floor to Adam, here's a few things I was thinking about as we were putting this conversation together. The first thing is modeling. The reason it was easy for me to easily just talk to Adam and give him all this information and really collaborate with him is because that's what was modeled to me by so many of my mentors through the years. And I guess I'm just blessed to work with such amazing people that made that easy. So I definitely want to chat about modeling today. Second thing is, what I definitely want to talk about at some point is siloing and those hoard information and how destructive and inefficient that mindset can be to an organization. Third thing I was thinking about is the idea of an expiration date or a shelf life. We all get into this career and we're all going to be here for a certain amount of time. And at one point, that chapter is going to close, whether it's on a rank, a team you're on, or a career. And, it's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. But how are you setting yourself up to when that expiration date does come? What have you done to pass on that information? What have you done to succession plan? What have you do to develop redundancy and a +1 and mentor and empower those people that are coming behind you so they can continue and build upon what you wrote down? So those are the few things I was thinking about. So anyway, Adam, thank you for being on this podcast with me. I'm glad that we're here today. We've known each other for a few days, but I just want to say thank you for joining me today, man.
Thank you, Chief, for having me. It's an honor to be chatting with you today, and thank you to the fire engineering family for letting us speak in this forum. I'm already taking my notes here, Chief. So
you and me both. All right, so I'm happy that we're on today. So I usually put a little bio about people, but I wanted you to start with that. So give me an idea of who Adam Haywood is, man. Go ahead and tell people what they need to know about for you, man.
Sure. Again, thank you again for having me. My name's Adam Haywood. For those of you that have never heard of me before, I'm a firefighter for the last 14 years out in the Colorado area. Started as a volunteer firefighter at a combination department, moved into a career role with them for a few years. And then the last 7 years, I've been at a career department down in the Denver metro area. Like you've kind of already alluded to it, I do own and operate a little training company on the side, independent fire training, where my big pet project is anything entry related. So whether it's conventional, through the lock, or saw based, I love talking about it. I love talking shop. Anything really kind of, truck tactics too. I may be stuck on an engine, but I play a truckie, at least in my mind. So I've been fortunate to begin traveling around my state and the country with my company, starting to deliver some classes on these various disciplines, whether it's, the conventional or just the through lock stuff, saw stuff, just like we've talked about. I never try to miss an opportunity when I'm out there teaching to try to learn while, not only to be a teacher while I'm out there, but also to be a student. So I've had the blessing, honestly, when I'm out there to learn from some real juggernauts in the fire service that have really helped kind of craft who I am and who I am as a firefighter, ride the back step, and who I am as a firefighter, teach other firefighters. I've got two little boys, Jackson and Everett. One's 4.5 and Everett is 1.5. My wonderful wife, Megan. We live up in northern Colorado. And I like to spend time outdoors with my boys and ride motorcycles with my dad when the weather's nice. So that's who I am in a nutshell there, Chief.
All right. Well, thanks for that short bio, man. So let's go back in time a little bit. So we met at FDIC in 2021. So for the conference itself, what was your impression of the conference? Was it worth it? What presenters or experiences impacted you? Walk me through that experience.
So I was very, very blessed early in my career to be introduced to FDIC Fire Engine Magazine training minutes. I grew up on watching the training minutes from the early 2010s. Lieutenant Mike Champo was a big one for me. Captain Rex Morris, and anybody you guys had on. But I was very lucky to go to FDIC in 2012. I went there as a volunteer, did the full conference with my guys, did the hot classes, did the lectures, walked the apparatus floor. And, mind you, I'm still pretty new in the fire service. I got 2 years on, right? 2 big whopping years. So kid in a candy store, having the time of my life. Like, this is, to me, like the Keystone Fire Conference. I like to refer to it. I still refer to it. I just talked to my training chief the other day about this. To me, FDIC is kind of like the Super Bowl of firefighting. It brings the greatest collection of fire service speakers, tacticians, figureheads, mentors in the fire service, all under one roof. And they're all there just to pass along their knowledge and their perspective and their advice to anybody who will listen. So by far, head and shoulders above any conference that I believe in. I've been there 3 times now. We met in 2021, and we also were out there, you and I, in 2023. So every time I've been out there, I've had a wonderful time. I've met and learned from guys like I say on my fire service Mount Rushmore. So I already mentioned Lieutenant Mike Champo, big role model of mine, Captain Bobby Eckert, Captain Bill Gustin, same conference where you and I met in 2021. I bugged him, got his phone number, called him. Literally, I came out of a meeting this morning, Chief, about a North area Denver high-rise committee, and I was referencing notes from my class I took with Captain Bill Gustin in 2021. So a lot of real ripple effect there. And then most recently, Chief Kurt Isaacson, Chief Dick Martin, I caught their classes. Those guys are great. Love them. The stuff that FDIC puts out is world class, and it's hard because the schedule is so jam-packed. Every year before I go, I'll write all the classes out on the whiteboard. Like, okay, Tuesday at 10 a.m., this guy's speaking. Oh, I want to see that. Okay, but Tuesday at 10 a.m., this other guy's speaking. Well, do I want to like hone my engine company skills? Do I want to go more like leadership? There's such a diverse array of speakers. It makes it kind of hard to decide like what classes do I want to attend? Like what kind of like track, if you will, do I want to follow while I'm out there? But man, it's a lot of fun going out there. I absolutely encourage anybody to make the pilgrimage to FDIC.
You definitely have to be strategic when you're going out there, and I think I missed that though the first time I was there. I just I kind of winged it, and that was a mistake. And I remember 2 things from it. 1, you got to be strategic and really make sure you choose your path. 2, it's not, and you probably know this at this point, and those people that have been there know now. I didn't get it at first, but it's not just the classes; it's everything in between. It's everything from the coffee shops afterwards, going to the bars later in the evening, all the events, the Fools event. There's everything in between is a time to interact, meet the sponsors area, all the floors out there with the trucks and the vendors. There's so many opportunities to meet and greet and interact and learn. And I didn't realize it the first time I went. And now I'm very strategic about what I'm doing when I go there. Because it's overwhelming, to say the least.
It is. It's a full day each and every day.
Yeah. But like you also mentioned, these people you mentioned before, whether it was Gustin or Campo or Isaacson or Martin, these are also real people, and they want to talk. They don't just want to present; they want to talk afterwards. They want to continue the discussions, and that's their superpowers. And it's what they model is what we try to follow, and it's a beautiful thing to continue those conversations. We don't want to just be one and done. We want to keep going and learn ourselves and whatnot. So that's good that you mentioned that, because I think that if somebody is going for the first time to this kind of conference, you got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy. You got to have almost a roadmap for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go a little bit further. I know that you started your own company, and I was excited when we first started talking that you had a plan, that you had this goal in mind. I think that the idea of setting big goals like that is something that does help people in their journeys, when you can envision what you would like to do one day. So talk me through that journey. In other words, you building this company, you going out there and training, how that developed, what you've learned from it so far, what have been some of the classes you put out there, what did you learn from those classes, what are you now transitioning to? Walk me through that like evolution.
Okay, so the whole thing really is just kind of happened organically, which to me, it makes it genuine and makes it feel like I'm doing something right. I'm on the right track. Like it's just happening for the right reasons. I wanted to put something together that I could start passing on some, semblance of what I've learned in my time going to conferences and drilling in the Bay late at night and, doing whatever regionally and teaching at the academy. Just these little nuggets that I picked up here and there from different people. Like, hey, it would have been nice to know when I was, a probie about this tool and what its capabilities and limitations are. So that's really kind of like the genesis behind it. But I have been instructing in some capacity or another for a little over a decade now. And in the summer of 2021, the catalyst, the thing that just kicked the whole thing into high gears, I was contacted by a gentleman named John Buttrick. He owned and operated Coastal Fire Training, which is a very through the lock heavy instructing cadre. He said, "Hey man, I've seen your stuff online. Do you want to come out to this conference in Missouri and teach with our cadre?" I'm like, absolutely. Where do I sign? Right. So how cool is that? I'm getting, I'm flying out. I'm meeting these guys from around the country. I'm teaching with them. I'm soaking it all in. I'm thinking, this is cool. This is awesome. I want to take this back to Colorado and do it there, because there's a couple of outfits in Colorado, but nothing that really talks a lot about locks and entry and saws and whatnot. So I just want to do my own thing, dip my toe in the water. I came back from that conference just completely, revved up, ready to go, almost incorporated with the state immediately. I've made a lot of missteps, just, opening like a little business checking account and like a little LLC, just kind of trying to make sure I cross my T's and dot my I's. I am not savvy with social media or video editing, but I'm getting a little bit better. But anyways, I came back, I incorporated that. And then almost immediately, like the next week, I flew out to Indianapolis, and by happenstance, I met you, right? So that was another kind of catalyst that kind of gave me, said, okay, keep running with this, go with this. Here's another guy who can impart more knowledge into you. I already loved saws and force of entry, but when I met you, you just helped me elevate my game to like the next level. Just encouraging deeper exploration, experimentation with new techniques, and kind of, I felt like you challenged me as an instructor, like, dude, do this, or take this, run with it. Here's, stacks and stacks of what I've got. You do it and see what works for you, and spread it, through your social media channels and what have you. So that really kind of laid the foundation for the company and kind of how I got started. And then, like I said, from there, I just started putting out original content of just stuff that I thought was cool. And people seem to really respond to it, especially some of the through the lock stuff. People are always, I probably get 1 or 2 messages a week. Hey, what lock should I put on my front door? I'm like, dude, I'm not a home security man. Like, I'm not a burglar, but people seem to love that content because it's exciting. It makes for, good visual content. Seem like locks getting broken and stuff like that. And people love saws, throwing rooster tails. So I think you and I have probably gravitated towards just things that are like, exciting, like chainsaws and rotary saws and ventilation and whatnot. And people just love that. People keep subscribing. It's been super humbling. It's been a lot of fun. I've been able to travel around the country and deliver classes on locks, saws, and even a little bit of hazmat. Somebody reached out to me last summer. I know you're a hazmat guy yourself, and they're like, "Hey, we heard you have these classes. Could you put together a hazmat class for us?" Since I work on the tech team in the Denver metro area, and I did, and that was a success too. So now I got that in the can. It's just another one we can deliver.
You know what? Let's talk about the Instagram thing for a second. I got to tell you, I think when I looked recently, correct me if I'm wrong, 37,000 followers at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, a little north of there.
Okay, so I thought that was interesting. Well, more than interesting to say the least. And listen, I've been following you for some time. What you're doing out there is interesting because as an instructor, as a presenter, I think that it speaks to a lot of what the culture of today, what the generations are looking for. Very short videos, visual in nature, very quick, but like immediately deployable. Like, here's a simple skill in less than a minute. Oh, crap. And then it's in their minds. I mean, whether it's adjusting the belt on a chainsaw, whether it's cutting a door a certain way, whether it's a through the lock thing. I think that you're just timely, if to say the least. You're hitting the nerves of what the generations and what the people want these days. We have a very short attention span, and your videos are watchable before I flip the phone up, before I slide to the next one, So, but what have been some of the ones that, I think you mentioned a couple, but how do you, and maybe I kind of explained it all, but is there anything that seems to stick more, like what people respond to more from what you put out there in terms of content?
Well, we got to remember, is that whatever I put out there is not guaranteed that it's just going to be firefighters. Like when you put something on YouTube, for example, like you're actively searching that, right? Go to YouTube, you type in like single man ladder throw. You're pretty much going to get all firefighter based content. If I go to, YouTube homepage, I'm probably not going to see that unless it's like the algorithm knows, I'm a firefighter. But Instagram and TikTok, which that's a whole nother can of worms, but Instagram and Facebook and all those short form video sites really just kind of put everything out on blast to everybody, right? So if a video, believe me, I am not a social media, magnate by any means. I'm just kind of throwing it and see what sticks to the wall. Some of these videos, I think, gain a little bit of traction and they just take off because of the comments. You'll go through some of the comments and people, the vast majority aren't even firefighters, right? So a lot of the views you're getting and the subscriptions may not be firefighters, but I've had people come in like, oh, I saw this video on blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm meeting them at a fire academy or whatever. So it is getting to people and it is getting to people like, oh, that is kind of cool. I didn't know firefighters do that. Well, I'm kind of between jobs right now. That might be something to look at. But that's my understanding of how that algorithm works. To your point, though, making short form vertical video that gets the point across instantly and, it doesn't take 10 minutes to get to the point that takes some serious work. I just edited a video this last week. I mean, I was on fire for a minute, right? And then I had my 2 boys and things kind of slow down naturally being a dad, right? And roving around a lot.
As they should.
And that is okay. But to make those videos and edit those, there's actually a lot of back end work that goes into it too. It's not just a simple like scroll. Oh, there it is. Scroll. And you scroll on, right? There's a lot of thinking and like storyboarding. I know that sounds so dumb for a guy who's, sitting on a fire engineering podcast talking about Instagram, but storyboarding on how to set the video up so that it captures a firefighter's attention. He's going to stop, watch it for the 30, 40 seconds, like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I can, save that, bring it to my crew. That was a good idea for a prop, whatever, right? And hopefully out of the, several 100,000 people that view these things, a couple guys are taking it back to the firehouse and doing something with it.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that there's a lot to unpack here. It's going back to the reason we're having this conversation in terms of mentoring, in terms of sharing knowledge. What you're doing is essentially demonstrating a certain level of humility. You have all this content and you're not asking anybody to pay you for it. You're dumping it out there and people are digesting it. They're hungry for it. They're eating it up. They're liking it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is good. But you're putting it out there for the world. You're trying to help our brothers and sisters by putting out some little nuggets out there that they may have never seen before, that challenges their preconceived notions, that gives them another tool. I hate to use the word tool in the toolbox, but it's the truth. Give them something else to look at or think about and digest a little bit. So you're putting a lot out there for nothing. You're sharing knowledge. And I think that's part of what, in terms of mentorship, in terms of empowerment, in terms of whatever we're talking about is important for us. We can't be the ones that hoard information and silo and just keep it all to ourselves. And you're freely sharing a ton of stuff that is obviously being looked at a lot. And it's worth it. So that's a lot.
Chief, just to speak on that real quick, one thing that's always stuck with me for years now, I don't remember who said it or where I heard it, but I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but in the fire service as instructors, like we really don't own anything, right? Like the guy who invented, if you will, the barn door cut, right? Or the inverted V or whatever, all these different cuts, like he doesn't go out and license that and say, hey, you can't cut that garage door without paying a $3,500 annual fee to use that cut or what have you, right? He found a way, he or she found a way to cut a door efficiently, and he showed the next guy, and he showed the next guy, and he showed the next guy, and it just takes off like wildfire. And that is what's so cool about the fire service to me, because I don't think you see that in the corporate America, where somebody says something really cool, says they internalize it, right? They silo it and say, well, if we let this cool thing get out, this new way of doing things, then our competitors will do it, and then we're no better. And they're right back where they started. So I really believe in that. Like, I don't own any of this. I'm not making, none of this is mine. Somebody showed it to me. It worked. I've tried it in training and on real calls. Everything that I try to put out is vetted. Maybe you try it. Here's just another way to do it. So I wholeheartedly believe in that philosophy, Chief.
And listen, there's a lot of what's the word? I guess humility that comes to that, but also putting yourself out there. You're going to get a lot of positive responses, but you're also going to get the couch. What do they call the couch potato commandos that are going to come after you saying, "What are you doing? That's BS. That's stupid." You're going to get that too. I'm sure you've had a small share of that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way of the world. It's how the world we live in today. But putting yourself out there like that is powerful. And I think that just for the listener, if you haven't seen independent fire training on Instagram, look it up. It's good content out there.
Thank you, Chief.
In terms of saws, I don't usually get tactical, but we got to talk saws. We got to.
Let's do it, baby.
So let me just make sure the listener understands why am I so ate up with saws and overhead doors and stuff. Is because when I first started doing this, the first overhead door I was told to cut, I failed miserably at. It was just around 2000 or 2001. I was in a neighboring city, and my directive was, "Hey, go ahead and take that saw and force that door with the saw." And I failed miserably. And because I failed so bad, I had to get better. I did research. I looked at. I did everything I could to make sure that I never looked stupid and as goofy as I did then. And I never wanted to make my department look as bad as I made them look that day, which is why I took off this role and then kept going with the saws and the doors and whatnot. And also, it showed me a lot more about how South Florida, for example, is a lot different in building construction than the rest of the country. So we have to know our job. We have to get tactical. We have to be almost artistic with this, because the same way somebody cuts a door in Idaho may not work the best in South Florida. So let's get geeky for a little bit. Like, for example, for you guys, like when you're, I guess, how to phrase this question. What are some of the big nuggets you have when you're teaching your saw classes?
The big thing for me, Chief, the number one thing is body mechanics, right? You cannot be an effective sawyer, saw operator, whatever you call it, wherever you're from, if you don't know how to hold the dang saw, right? And
Okay.
you're a threat to yourself and you're a threat to others around you on the fire ground. If you're just chattering around, right, and you're willy-nilly and you don't have, the arm strength or, knowing how to hold it with your long bones or what have you. So that is paramount. I teach saws at our internal lateral academy. I'm teaching saws that are coming up career academy. The big thing for me is I can teach you we'll teach you how to run it, start it, take care of it, right? What blades and blah, blah, blah. The next thing in that kind of crescendo up to full on operations is, okay, how do you hold the thing? Because for me, I'm right there with you. I love all the parallels kind of between our careers. Sometimes I feel like I'm 15 years behind you, but I remember being at an academy, probably, 11, 12, just helping out as a volunteer. Yeah, here's the K-12. And I'm myself, chattering around, trying to make a cut on this, panic drop bar door. Because I didn't know how to properly hold the saw, how to balance the saw, right? How to pivot the saw off my body. So by far and above, the most important thing to me is body mechanics. And then from there, we'll teach you utility, right?
So I'll agree with you on that. One of the things I start off with my saw classes is what I call saw etiquette. In other words, how to properly hold, position, all that jazz that you just mentioned. It's amazing to me how some people, when they're holding a rotary saw, for example, will gravitate to that one spot on the top of the handle, and just that's where their hand stays. They won't touch any other part of the handle. In reality, you got to be able to maneuver your hand around that handle to hold it in different configurations, whether it's horizontally, vertically, if you have to go diagonally. And when they're holding it just by that one spot, how inefficient and unergonomically correct that is. What I usually do too is if I'm teaching, let's say, a overhead door forcible entry class, I always, if I have multiple doors, the first door is a sacrificial door. The first door we're cutting is a sacrificial door. What do I mean by that? We're not practicing barn doors, door within the doors, box cuts. We're letting you just get the kinks out. We're letting you work it out. Chances are you probably haven't held a saw in a long time or used it, and you're going to bind it up. You're going to not hold it right. It's going to be goofy. You're going to go off kilter a little bit. Get the kinks out. Make your mistakes. Fail fast, but get them out of your way now. And what I found is after class after class after class, if we just take that first door, and this goes with other skills too, whether you're cutting a rebar or whatever else, if you just let them have that one door where it's sacrificial, you're just chopping up, getting the kinks out, working out all those kinks. When it comes time for the next doors to come up and you're actually deploying the cuts you want to cut, you actually look like you're a professional. You actually look like you know what you're doing. You actually look like you know you've done it before. And it's so smooth. It's so clean, so much cleaner than if they haven't had those kinks worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things I've always tried to do with the classes I've taught.
Yeah, you got to give them that foundation, because I've really found that people are intimidated by K-12s too. It seems like there's always the heavy hitters, like, yeah, give me that thing. I'm right there with it. But there's also some people that kind of like a little bit more meek, a little more mild mannered, that, come through these classes, like they're kind of hanging in the back, hoping you don't call on them, and they just haven't been shown how to properly handle the sauce. So that I love that progression you're talking about. I wrote it down here. First door is sacrificial in your class, just to promote, proper mechanics, running cuts, things like that. So our goal as instructors is really kind of strip away that intimidation of this nasty, wicked, cool tool, right? No break, 5,400 RPM, throwing lots of chunks, and give you this tool so you can control it and make cuts like a surge or like a master butcher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing I don't do is I don't assume anything. And this goes with a lot of things I've seen recently as an instructor, whether I'm teaching hazmat for USAR or refresher or whatever, or SAWs, or helping out the cadets or recruit academies with whatever I'm teaching. I don't assume anything these days. Like, for example, I was teaching a group, it doesn't matter where, about some basic hazmat stuff. And I was talking about pH paper. Now, for me, okay, yeah, I'm a hazmat geek, so I know a little bit more than the average person. That's because I'm just a geek when it comes to this. But with me, I'm like, okay, well, everybody knows pH paper. Everybody's got to know pH paper. And the question was, okay, guys, well, here's pH paper. I know it's boring, but when it turns red, what do you have? And half the class said base, and half the class said acid. I'm like, oh, wow. Let's back up a step and just start fresh. And there's no emotion attached to it. I'm not upset or going to make fun of anybody, but it reminded me we have so much to do out there these days that the public is expecting so much from us. It's hard to remember everything that we do. So the same thing with saws. I don't assume anything. I don't assume they know what mixed fuel is. I don't assume they know that when they start that saw and run it, that they're going to understand that the forces are going to push them around a little bit. I don't assume anything. So I'm very basic. And I make sure when I'm teaching that I'm not being basic because I'm undermining your intelligence, because I just don't know where you're coming from. And I want to make sure that I start from the basics and work that up. And I think a lot of people appreciate that, because when they come, they don't want to ask the questions. They don't want to go, hey, can you tell me what mixed fuel is? They don't want to be the person to ask it because they don't want to feel goofy. So I try to eliminate that goofy feeling by starting from a ground point that we all can agree on and building up in a quick fashion. So we're all on the same plane. But it's amazing what, and again, I'm not upset. We're just expected to know so much these days that it's okay to start from the basics and then build them up a little bit, depending on where we're at.
Sure. That's a challenge as a fire service instructor, is creating a class that captivates the attention of a day one guy who's probably maybe never swung a hammer or, used a drill in his life, to a 35-year vet, right? So you have to build your class so that you're giving them tips and tricks along the way that even that cater to the new guy, but also the seasoned guy, like, oh, I've never seen that before. That's a cool way to do it. That is the dance as a fire service instructor for sure.
So we've been talking about saws a little bit, and I think that if we keep going down this route, we might be here all day. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think this is fun. And maybe as we're talking more about some of the things we're planning to talk about, we can revisit some of those areas. But let me ask you some questions. And go into speaking to the listeners when we're doing the podcast like this. I think it's important to understand that the only reason you and I are talking right now is because you decided to ask me a question. You came up and asked a question. And just starting the dialogue resulted into what we have now is basically a camaraderie, a relationship. And I think that's important. People would be surprised what they would get if they would just ask. If they would just ask a question. if they would just start a dialogue, start a discussion, show some interest. And that brings me to something that David Rhodes said last year. We were talking about, I had him on the podcast, and we were talking about the idea, and he said this, that we need to be talent scouts early on. We need to be looking for talent early. And that resonated with me so much in terms of what we're talking about in terms of mentorship and recognizing and trying to get those people to get involved early. So when you think about that, where does your mind go? When you think of the idea of recognizing talent, trying to build up other people, in terms of mentorship, what does that look like for you?
So I would say first and foremost, recognizing and employing your people basically in accordance with like their capabilities. So that rolled off the tongue so easily because I wrote it down. But to elaborate, I served as a mentor this year to a new firefighter who rove through my crew. And it's a full-time job raising a guy up who has no fire experience to, the level of competent backseat firefighter. It's a large book they go through. There's EMS, there's hazmat, there's tech rescue, there's yada, yada, yada. There's all these disciplines, right? But ultimately, it falls on the company officer and the mentor to get them through this journey. So one thing I really tried to do this year as the mentor, if you will, was try to say, okay, today we're going to do tech rescue. Well, I know my fire medic, Amelia, for example, she's a big tech rescue nerd. She teaches, sprat and ropes and all that stuff. I know her capabilities. Let's give her the reins today and say, you craft the training for whoever, and you take this and you row it. I'll be right there behind you and help you enter the training and write the tap if you need it or what have you, right? But I think finding people like, okay, this guy's a wildland guy. This guy is a truck guy. This guy's really good at, whatever. Getting those people involved and employing them, really buys in a lot of, I think it helps me find if you will, the talent, right? So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I love that David Rhodes quote. I'm going to have to marinate on that myself a little bit and start thinking of talent scouts myself, because I've had multiple people reach out to me wanting to, hang out and talk, and you can almost recognize in me like this guy or this gal gets it, and I want to help them out with their journey too.
Yeah, I encourage people to ask questions. Like we almost have to give permission to a lot of our folk that are, especially the new ones, to talk, to step up, to inquire, to ask questions. But I got to tell you, I'm sure a lot of people out there are experiencing the same thing with people leaving, people retiring, there being a switch, their department's getting younger. My department, for example, we're going to be losing in 2027 30 people, most of which are captains and officers, and the next year 30 more. Again, a chunk of them which are officers. We see that coming. We're totally cognizant of it, and we're thinking about it. How do we do that? So even now, I find myself looking across the board, top to bottom, even with our new cadets. Even though their first year, they're focused on their first year of probation, absolutely. But after that, I'm already starting to identify little things that they bring to the table, whether they have admin experience, whether they're really dialed in when it comes to hazmat or special ops, whether they're an EMS geek, and I can use the hell out of them for training or learning new skills or teaching new skills. I'm identifying them early, really early. But a lot of times it helps when they step up and ask a question or show that they're interested. You don't have to brag, you don't have to be arrogant, but just let me know you're interested. Put yourself on my radar. I'm looking, but it sure does help when you let me know, hey, I have a genuine interest in this.
Sure.
So that helps.
And let them know that you trust them too, and you're giving them the opportunity. So if they reach out to you, hey, can I help out with the next engineer evaluation? Whether it's, running around with hose or getting coffee for whatever, absolutely. Come on down, do whatever, help us out. Like you've reached out to me. Now I'm going to extend, my hand to you, and I show that I believe in you and bring you into the fold as well. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Right. And you mentioned mentorship programs. I know in our department, we do have a mentorship program. Our mentorship program revolves around our new hires, our cadets that go into being probationary firefighters. So that's what our mentorship program is. And we assign each of our probationary firefighters with a mentor on the job. And they get to know them. They help them out with different things. And it may not always be skill-based, too. It might be, hey, are you Are you surviving at the station? Do you know how to talk to people? Do you know what you want to do when you grow up? Whatever. It could be a variety of things. They cater it to the individual based on where they are in their lives, where they are in their professional lives, and so on and so forth. But I'm to the point where I don't think these days in this environment where we are in the fire service today, that you can't have some sort of mentorship program. It's almost as if you need one these days, considering all that we're asking of our people, all the stresses that are out there, all the recruitment and retention challenges we're having. You need to have or be thinking about having or developing some sort of mentorship program. So for the people that are listening, if you have any questions on that, this is where, afterwards we can talk, we can email, because that's a big deal. And it does help. We've seen a lot of advantage of having those in place. So I know that you have one as well, correct?
That's right. We have really kind of informal and formal mentorship channels within my department. We have assigned mentors as you exit the academy. We have like a 28-week academy going right now. Those guys will be assigned a mentor online for their probationary year. But then we also have like these informal things where we invest a lot of money in you, right? 2 sets of gear and, doctor visits and blah, blah, uniforms, yada, yada. We don't want you to fail. It may seem like some guys are kind of, jerks, but for the most part, guys that are into the job, I don't want you to fail. I want you to come out and be a rock star, right? So I want to give you the best chance possible to set you up for your, like you said, clear-cut expectations and firehouse culture and blah, blah, blah. Before our recruits go to the academy, we have a twofold approach. One, the off-going probies have this tradition. I was part of it years ago, where they'll go out informally in street clothes and go to like a local brewery or a coffee house in the district and just kind of like, just from peer to peer, give them like, hey, here's how my first year went. If you get Captain Smith, he's really particular about this. Or, if you're at station 14, don't forget there's a secret mop closet, whatever, right? So it's just peer to peer mentorship, if you will. And then after that, that's encouraged by our department. We don't like give you, here's $100 for coffee, go out and do it. But they say, hey, they poke the last year's class. Hey, have you reached out to the new guys yet? Do you need their phone numbers? Can we get you in touch? After that, there's an actual formal onboarding week before the academy where we have a peer panel, and it's just firefighters and engineers. There are no officers allowed, no chiefs, nobody of any company officer rank. It's just, again, from peer to peer. And it's usually an open forum. I've participated in several of them where it'll go up to 4 hours. When they sit on one side of the table, we sit on the other, and we just kind of talk about our experiences being a probie and, what it's like to be a firefighter. How do you balance 4896? What if you have a wife and kids? What's academy like? What should I be eating in academy? Yada, yada, yada. So there's that. And then, of course, the more formal mentorship program that we've outlined and I've been pioneering in the last year or two. So I truly believe we do a pretty good job of setting our people up for success. And then ultimately it falls onto the, whatever company they land with. But you can't say we didn't try with the, a 3-pronged approach here.
Well, I'm good. I'm glad we talked about both informal and formal mentorship. I think both are important. I'm glad we touched upon that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I always ask on the show here, the podcast, is involving leadership. When I present, I always ask the audience, I poll them, what do they think are a few traits of leadership are? And it's a really interesting discussion that ensues afterwards. So for you, same question. So when you think about high-performing engine companies, leadership, those that have led you, when you think of leadership, what kind of traits do you gravitate towards?
I've been very blessed to work with a lot of great officers over my career, and I've kept a running log in my phone of just kind of some expectations that they've set right out of the gate that I want to set when I have my own company someday. So I would say first and foremost, right out of the gate, when we get a new crew or a new member comes in, traits of a good leader to me is setting crystal clear expectations from the onset, getting together and lining out everybody's expectations. Okay. I might be the new officer here, but I like X, Y, and Z. We're going to do, A, B, and C on this. If it presents like this, we'll do 1, 2, and 3, whatever. And then getting everybody else's expectations too. Okay, you're the senior engineer. what do you expect for us with truck checks? Okay, you're the medic. How do you want to run your standard core? Like, are you hands off? Are you hands on? Like I try to get everybody's expectations that I have for them and that they have for me too, right? Okay, firefighters, what do you expect out of your boss, right? Do you want me to be, checking in every day? Hey, how's that fire instructor 2, sir, going? Or are you like more of a hands off kind of guy? Where are you at on this? So that's a biggie for me. That kind of wraps into having accountability both ways, right? At the end of the year, everybody has to get an employee evaluation, at least at my fire department. Now it's informal, but some leaders will have their crews do an evaluation on them, called a 360 evaluation. So it goes, full circle, I guess. That speaks volumes to me. That says, hey, I'm not just here to put paper on you. Put some paper on me. How can I get better, right? So I'm holding myself accountable while holding yourself accountable. Moving right along, I think a good leader has to be tactically and technically proficient. Like, I don't want to work with a guy who can't tie an inline clove-hitch. I don't want to work with a guy who can't throw a ladder by himself. Like, you've got to be able to do the job, right? You can't sit here and tell me, make sure you do X, Y, and Z when you can't even do X, Y, and Z. And then finally, the buck stops with you as a leader. I think you need to seek responsibility and take ownership for all your actions as a leader yourself and as your crew, and be that shield for your guys when, admin comes down and says, hey, your guy was wearing work gloves when he's throwing the ladder, and rather than throwing him under the bus, like, well, he was doing this and then moving on to this, like, having some sort of, protection in place for your people. I'm kind of all over the map there, but clear expectations, remaining accountable, being, proficient at your job, and then taking ownership of yourself and of your crew as a whole. Those are my big 4. I really chewed on this one for a while last night, Chief, and finally put it together about 11:30 at night after another call. So that's where I'm at.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned those things, and I gravitate towards a lot of what you just said. And I remember listening to Mark Von Oppen when I first went to FDIC, listening to his Fully Involved lecture. I really loved the idea of the expectations, both setting the expectations and, these are for you, these are for me, your expectations. And he does a really good job with that. But I think the times that I failed or struggled with leadership or communication was when I did not set clear expectations. That's when I failed. So when you say that, that's important. When you don't do that, you set yourself up for failure. So I'm glad you started with that. And I think that people who are listening probably could attest to that. Also, the 360 evals, I like that idea because not only as an officer or, we're evaluating our crews, but it shows a lack of hubris or humility to ask people around you, how am I doing? How am I doing? I got a buddy I worked with, one of our deputy chiefs said routinely we'll get together and in private we'll go, hey, how did I do today? Give me a grade. And like, hey, listen, I did a presentation. How did I do? Well, Steve, your content was A+, but your delivery was a B-. Really? But it also, you have to be prepared for those kind of things. You have to be ready for that critique, that growing critique. So I get that too. And you mentioned tactical proficiency. I was reading a book, and I mentioned this every so often on the podcast. It was Stephen M. R. Covey who wrote The Speed of Trust. And he defines leadership as a combination of character and competence. So when you talk about that competently, tactically proficient person, that's part of the equation that builds trust. When the people that you're around are proficient, they're tactically savvy, you trust them more on scene. It leads into a variety of conversations. So yeah, I definitely appreciate what you're saying there in terms of what you mentioned. On the other side of it, as we're continuing to talk, what are your concerns these days? Like, now that you've been on for a little bit, you're teaching a lot, you're seeing a lot of people, you're having conversations, you're going to conferences. This is one of my favorite questions. So what kind of concerns do you have? Like, what keeps you up at night these days?
This all honestly kind of wraps back in the whole overarching theme of today is, expectations and kind of traits of leadership and whatnot. But the big thing for me, I'm 35, turning 36 next month. You know, I've been doing this professionally for 11 years now. Like I'm at a point where like I'm technically pretty proficient. I'm starting to get, you know, my feet underneath me, but I still have a long, long way to go. Right. But I've also been to a couple fires now. Right. I've been to a couple cores, a couple, you know, whatever. Right. So, I can say without a doubt, there is a new generation coming in, right? We're getting people that are 22, 21, coming through the door now. And the thing with me, and I do not follow me, time marches on. You're going to get younger people in every year. The big change I've noticed, at least out here in the Denver metro area, is that we have more and more people coming online that have zero fire experience. You know, and not to sound like some old timer, but, you know, 14 years ago when I started, the thing was you ground out 2 to 3 years as a volunteer. You flew all over the country. You tested. You did whatever. You know, you did the CPAT 15 times a year, blah, 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 whatever, to get a job. And there was, you know, several hundred guys for a couple of spots. The reality is that just isn't the case anymore for whatever reasons. So you're getting people that come in and say, oh, firefighting, that looks kind of cool. I'll give that a shot. But they've never been around a firehouse before. They don't quite know like firehouse culture, the kitchen table. So my big worry is like, these guys that are coming in, am I setting them up for success and preparing them for the culture and for the expectations and for the stressors of the job itself? I want to illustrate, we had a young guy come in. He's 20 something, right? Younger guy. And he honestly, first firefighter department job, he didn't know he's probationary year. He was, I don't want to say caught, but his officer found him playing video games, you know, in his, like during the daytime in his room with some other firefighters. And the officer's like, what are you doing in here? Right. The officer, I don't think really set that expectation that you were out here, you know, cleaning the tools, doing whatever, studying your book. And he didn't know that either because he has never been around a firehouse. He went through the academy, did fine, got online. 2 months later, everything's hunky-dory. He's like, oh, I can take a break. So I'm not trying to be, you know, an ogre here, but there's a time and a place for that. And it's definitely not your first year or even like year 3 in my book. So I just want to make sure that the younger generations that's coming in, I'm saying, look, man, this is the expectation. We want you in, you know, whatever your uniform policy is, we want you in, you know, getting up and running to the door, running to the phone, whatever your firehouse culture is, we got to be telling these guys our expectations. Otherwise, they're not going to know, and they're just going to go about their merry day and think it's just another job, right? And man, that those first few years that establishes your reputation for the next several. So I want to set my guys up, you know, for success.
You know, it's interesting. I wasn't sure where you're going with that, to be quite honest, when you answered the question and the fire experience. But then when you brought it to the culture, that they don't know the culture, that hit the nerve, because I think about the same thing. In other words, as we're bringing these people on, I don't mind so much the lack of skill. We can teach skill. We can teach reps and skill and all that jazz. And experience is one of those things that's going to come on the job. Some departments get more than others, depending on where they work. Got that. In terms of the skills, I'm not too worried. If they are learners, if they can learn, if they can be taught, I'm good. We can work with that. It's the quality of the candidate coming in. Are they mature? Are they eager to learn? Are they a good person? Are they moral? Are they ethical? If we can have the person with good character traits who's inexperienced, we can teach that. I can work with that. We can work with that. The opposite, I struggle with that. But to your point, yes, and we see a lot of people coming on board that have no idea about the culture of the firehouse, and we struggle with that in my department, because now, in addition to us having to teach them everything fire suppression, everything EMS, paramedic sign-off process, a little bit about special ops, and all the other things in and outs, we have to teach them about our culture as well, and everything from just how to make coffee to how to respect the chain of command. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Opening, closing, basic things that aren't basic anymore. Things that should be common knowledge that ain't so common. And I will tell you one thing. One thing we have heard a lot from our recent candidates or our cadets that are coming in is that one of the big things they say when they say, why do you want to work here? What we say, why do you want to work here is, well, I did my ride time review for EMT or paramedic, or I had some experience working with you. I did a ride along and I liked what I saw and I wanted to work here. And I try to make sure we express that across the board to all the people that are having these students in some way, shape, or form ride with us. Hey, you're their first impression. And whatever you're doing, you must be doing it right, because the people that are coming here are saying that over and over again, that because of the experience you give them, they want to have more of it. So, and furthermore, we're trying to figure out, well, what else can we do to explain our culture to them prior to them getting here on day one, where they're like, oh, crap, I didn't know that's what this was about. So it's challenging for us too, man. We have a lot of these folk coming in that aren't second or third generation firefighters that think it's, oh, cool, let me try that. Like you said, trying it, just give it a shot.
Yeah, this sounds fun.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Oh, you get a pen, whatever. But yeah, so it's an additional stress on us to make sure they understand what they're getting into when they get here. So you're right. And then, going through a career in terms of the mentorship, like we're talking about, once they're on board, how do we maintain that level of professionalism, that love for the job through a career, not just through the first year, but what do we do afterwards to not only professionally develop them, but to keep that motivation going. And that's when, everything we talked about so far from the beginning on now kind of helps out, keeping them on the job, keep them motivated about the job, whether you're going to a conference with them, ask them to join you, maybe as they get later on, co-teaching them or co-teaching with them in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, man, I get it. I think that your concerns are valid, and definitely when people are listening, they're probably thinking the same thing.
Please don't take it that I'm a 10-year guy or whatever, and I did my time. I'm on the camp like, look, this is what's coming in through the door, and we either cater to them and raise them right, or we just completely fail these people. And I want to raise them right, so I want to bring them up under our wing and say, like, here's what's expected of you, blah, 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 blah. I want to set you up for success. I just want to make that crystal clear.
No, and I think that you said that, and I held to that. You even said it earlier, we don't want to see you fail. We're trying to work with them. And I think that we're to the point, and at least I'm hearing this more, if I reach back a few years, I could see and hear a lot of people that I associate with just angry at people coming into the job that maybe don't have the skill sets that we once did, whether it's, and you hear all the time, that guy doesn't know how to start a saw, that guy's never worked on whatever, they've never done manual labor. Well, that's what we're dealing with. That's what we have. But at the same token, that's the opportunity that I think that goes not unnoticed, but not capitalized on enough. So for example, if you got that person that's coming onto the job with no life experience, they've never made a cup of coffee, they've never cleaned a bathroom, they've never started a saw, they've never mixed fuel, they've never done any of that. Why would you not want to be the person to teach that skill to them? And then you not only taught them something they will use for a career, you're teaching them something they will use for a lifetime. We're talking here about mentorship. Oh, isn't that it?
That's it,
baby.
I mean,
but it goes back to perspective. The name of this podcast, Perspectives on Leadership. The perspective that when you have these guys that don't know poop from Shinola, that are just green as grass, that's just a golden opportunity to teach them the right way to do something, the right skill, something that they're going to remember you forever for. And you're going to side-eye that? Come on.
Totally.
It's a blessing. It's a gift to have that. Is it a lot of work? Oh yeah, it's a ton of work. But you reminded me of something. I was talking to Rusty Richter last month on the podcast, and I'm actually looking back at my notes just now. But he said something pretty impactful. I asked him the same question, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, what are your concerns?" And he actually wasn't concerned. He goes, "Listen, the next generation's in good hands. We're doing the right thing." But he also said, as long as we do our jobs, as long as we take care of them, which is exactly what we're talking about, everything will be fine as long as we are doing our part in mentoring that next generation and doing our job to train them, and not just pulling a line or starting an IV everything that needs to be there, all the things that are in that gap, finding a way to get them that information. And it is tough. It's a lot of work, man.
But how cool to leave your thumbprint on that generation,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I often ask the question at the beginning of some of the classes I do. I'm like, hey, who influenced you the most in the fire service? And I love getting the responses. And what I usually do is after I get those responses when the class is over, I know a lot of those people. I'll call them on the way home or after the class, go, hey, I taught this class today, and I asked them who the most influential person was. You were on that list. What do you think the reaction is? I mean, they're just, wow, really? And it's touching, to give them that sense of validation that they had some sort of impact on that person. And there's those opportunities everywhere you look. Everywhere you look. You just have to put in the energy. Anyway, man. So listen, we're coming close to about an hour right now. But I guess, but first of all, what's next for you, man? Like, what else is on your radar these days? After we get done here, what's on the rest of you? What's your year look like?
So, looking immediately ahead, this coming April, so almost, like a month from today, I'll be out in Parsons, Kansas, at the LCC Fire School, Labette Community College Fire School. We were out there last year, and I just got to say, this is the hidden gem conference of the Midwest, if you will. It was like $100 for the weekend. Fantastic instructors. I was literally so impressed last time I was out there. When I signed up to do it again, I'm like, you got to get me in as a student because I want to take some of these engine classes, right? They have acquired structure live fires. They burn down multiple homes in a day. You're working with, some heavy hitters out of like Wichita and Olathe and some, Hutchinson. So good departments out in the Kansas area, KC Mo, KCK guys. So I'll be out there. I'll be delivering my Through the Lock lecture. And then as soon as I leave that class, shake some hands, get some phone numbers, I'm out as a student, grab my pack out of the truck and drill them the rest of the weekend. So fantastic. Check it out. I think it's $100 for the weekend. It's an easy drive from Kansas City. It's like a 10, 11 hour drive from Denver, but I'm going out with a buddy of mine from the North area. So we're going to have a lot of fun. And this all speaks to your mentoring me. I'm really excited that this next month's fire engineering, I have my second article coming out. So that's a huge feather in my cap. I mean, even if one person reads it, it's pretty cool that, to have an article in the magazine that I grew up reading and still read and is still in my briefcase right now, So that's coming out. That's specifically all about rotary saw blades.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. No, we'll do a lock one here soon, but this is all about blades and how to appropriately pair them with whatever power head you may be running at your department. The disadvantages and advantages of, abrasives versus carbide and carbide chunk versus, carbide tooth and yada, yada, yada. So that's number 2 coming out. Really, really excited for that. And then other than that, man, I'm just grinding things out. We're looking at a merge in the North area, which involves my department. So there's a lot of moving parts there. I've got a hand in that. Teaching at the North Area Fire Academy multiple times out there, my saw class, my lock class, getting out there, trying to, again, set expectations, get them on the right foot, right out of the gate. So other than that, raising 2 little boys, hopefully going to a couple fires here and there, reading some good books. That's my life, Chief.
All right, man. Well, I'm happy that your next article is coming out. And as a reminder to the listener, it's like, if you have something that's you're passionate about, put it in an article, man. Try to put that pen to paper, write an article, turn it in, see what happens. That's how I got this start for this platform. I wrote an article and somebody liked it. They put me on the Hump Day Hangout as a guest, and I started just hanging out with those guys, and it just progressed from there. But it started with an article. It started with just putting pen to paper. Everybody learns differently. Everybody has a different platform. Like you said, even if one person reads it, it was worth it. You got it out there. Someone in the universe read it. It's all worth it. It's good. It's a good thing.
Chief, can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
I meant to touch on it earlier. One thing that I believe in, and it brought you and I together, and I've seen multiple instructors, at the end of a class, when you're out there and they put their phone number, email up at the end of the screen, we want you to call us. I want to talk shop with you. Send me a message on Instagram or my email, or I give out my phone number on a business card, whatever. Like, reach out, because you never know. I'm just thinking, man, like this whole butterfly effect of going out to FDIC in 21, immediately following the conference in Missouri, meeting you, right, getting your phone number, and like now here we are talking on a podcast together. So you never know how things snowball. By all means, if you see an instructor putting his phone number out there, he's not just doing it for show. Like, he's saying, "Yo, call me. I'm a fire nerd. Call me."
Yep, that's it. We're the same way, man. We're the absolute same way. So as we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to go over some of these things. We talked a little bit about the subject matter today was mentorship. We talked about our story and our relationship, how we met, and the idea that staying away from the silos, staying away from being this person that hoards all the knowledge, and that idea of sharing the knowledge. And guys like Bill Dustin, who shared so passionately with me, was a model to me to share with other people like you, Adam. And we model behaviors all the time. It's one thing to say something, but when your actions match the words, and people see their action, when you model behavior, that's when more of the impact takes place. I'm really happy to keep following you on Instagram, man. I love your videos. I'm so proud of you, man. All that little content, it's so valuable. It's so now. It's so just relevant to what we're doing. And you're definitely sharing without a problem, and it's a model for people to watch. I did like that we talked about mentoring both informally and formally, and you're right. We're not out to fail people. We want them to succeed. We don't want them to fail. We try to build them up and mentor regardless of where they are, and that comes in all kinds of shapes and forms other than skills, but what other life skills are missing, and can we fill that gap? Can we be that person to teach them something that not only they'll use for their career, but for their life? And there's an opportunity there of mass proportions. We also talked about the idea that being tactically proficient is part of how you build that trust. It's part of that equation that I mentioned, where trust equals character plus competence, and have that competency. And then we talked about more about the culture, and how even though these people coming into the job today may not understand that culture, that's sort of another opportunity for us to instruct them, guide them, and make sure they understand what that looks like. Not only how to do things tactically, how to cut a roof or use a saw or whatever, but to survive in this fire service, to thrive in this fire service, understand what culture being a firefighter looks like in 2024. So anyway, man, listen, this has been awesome. I'm so happy we got to do this, man. It's been a great conversation. So as we close up here, any final thoughts?
No, Chief. I just wholeheartedly believe in destiny. I feel like we were put together for a reason, and here we are. And hopefully somebody got something out of this. And I appreciate you having me on, and you encouraging me to write that first article, because there's another one coming out now. So like you said, you never know what's going to happen. I wish you all the best, and I hope we can keep talking shop in the future.
All right, man. Well, listen, thanks again. For listeners, thank you for listening once again. Like I said, you have your choice of what to listen to. It was wonderful to have another talk in the books, and someone that I've developed a great relationship over these years. For you guys, the FDIC is coming up next month in April. If you haven't registered, get on that right now. It's going to be wonderful. All that being said, thank you for listening. I value your time. I hope this was valuable to you. You can reach out to me anytime. Adam, how can they get in touch with you?
You can just reach out to me through my website, independentfiretraining.com, or at Independent Fire Training on any social media channel. All
right. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next month, second Friday of the month, every month. Thank you for listening. God bless. Be safe, and we'll see you soon.